Thank you very much for coming. I'm with my production company is Timid Monster. We've produced a couple of films that have screened in Memphis and around town and stuff like that. I'm going to be taking you through a number of the shots from our film Avarice, which was written and directed by Rachel Taylor, sitting here in the back. Very honored to have been able to work on that project. So I'm going to basically give you guys an overview of color grading, of visual effects compositing, of working with green screens. Is there anyone here that does any kind of visual effects work professionally? Yes? Okay, so how about some people that have dabbled and have kind of like a rough knowledge of some of this stuff? A handful of you. And the rest, I'm assuming, are coming in here with no idea of what this stuff is, right? Okay, great. So, like I said, I'm going to kind of provide some kind of general approaches to how I work on these things. If you guys need a clarification, or if something's kind of hard to see on the screen, I think with the light coming in, it might be a little tricky. Let me know, and I can clarify, but we are going to do a little Q&A at the end if you guys want to hang on to your bigger questions, and we can talk to them then. All right, so I got into visual effects by way of graphic design. I did graphic design for almost 10 years, kind of in the early 2000s, and one of the big cool things was to do photorealistic graphics, especially for like websites where, you know, your menu across the page was maybe little post-it notes that had been scribbled on with a pen, and, you know, you're reading the content of the page on a notepad, and, you know, there's a coffee stain off to the side. And I really like that kind of grungy, kind of photorealistic stuff. And so as I learned to do graphic design, I began to understand how to break down images and figure out what makes things look very real. So if we take the idea of a piece of paper with some writing on it, right? We can describe it, we can say it's white, it's kind of rectangular, the text is going to be black. That is a truthful representation of what a piece of paper looks like, but if I print it out and hold it in my hand, is that going to be completely accurate? Does that look completely photorealistic? And so what I did here is I actually printed one out. Who can tell me, who can start naming some of the differences that you see in the two images? Yeah, the perspective is different, yeah.
Color?
Yeah, the colors. What about the color?
It's darker and shadowy.
Yeah, there's like a gradation from a light area to a darker area. Anything else?
Background.
Yeah, it's got a different background. It's in a different context.
Texture looks different.
Yeah, the texture on the paper. Yeah.
Paper's kind of curved a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of curved. It's wrinkled. Maybe down here in the corner. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Yeah, you can. There's like a little wrinkle here, like a bend, like a crinkle. Anything else?
The background.
Yeah, the background. Yeah. And a couple other things like this is even, it's kind of hard to tell on the projector, but it's even a little bit softer. It's a little fuzzy, where this is very crisp and very hard. This is kind of soft. You know, the edge, there's no true straight lines on this piece of paper. They're all kind of curved in one way or another. So if this is a perfect representation of what a piece of paper with some text on it is, what are these characteristics that we're kind of naming? They're imperfections, right? And so to create something that's realistic, you have to make it imperfect. You've got to break it down. And even if you zoom in on this picture, the camera and the computer software has even added even further imperfections. You've got kind of this pixely, you see these little blocky regions. It might be kind of hard from the background. You can kind of see rough edges on the text. There's a little bit of grain in that image. So when you're doing your visual effects, you've got to start breaking down what are all the imperfections that are going to be in the world of the characters. And even beyond that, when you're doing your green screen compositing, you've got a whole other list of characteristics that you've got to be thinking about that the camera itself adds. So you have things like lens flare, right? You've got, is the shot in focus or is it blurry? You've got these little kind of hexagon patterns, those little bokeh patterns. Is that what they're called, bokeh? It's one of those words I see on the internet, but I never know how to pronounce it right. Anyways, so that's an artifact that we don't typically see with our eyes. You've got dirt and junk that's on the lens. This might be a little hard to see, but this is a straight fence, right? But yet it's bowed. So the lens is even adding a little bit of shape and warp and distortion to it. You've got motion blurring, you've got motion artifacting, you've got grain that's kind of natural to the camera. And this one's kind of tricky. You know what this is a representation of? Anybody? Exactly. This is chromatic aberration. You can kind of see these kind of violet tinges on these leaves, and that's an artifact that comes from the lens. And all of these things kind of have to be taken into account when you're doing your effects compositing, because without these imperfections, your shot's going to look too perfect. It's going to look fake. It's going to look like that picture on the left, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to basically walk you guys through a couple of these shots here. Let me back out of this. Actually, I can do one better. So I put a video together for you guys. Let me get this thing open real quick. Click on one thing at a time, maybe. So when you're working with your shots and you're working within the software, you're going to be adding these kind of imperfections and these details kind of in layers, and they're going to be stacked up on top of the image. So what I did was I took selections of shots from Avarice, and I kind of broke apart the layers so that you guys can kind of... What is this back here? There's something open. I don't want that. All right, I'll let you guys take a look at this. Fighting the sun a little bit on some of these. But as you can see, these things are kind of done in layers, and you can kind of peel the layers back to get to the raw footage, add them back on to get your final composite. So I'm going to be working in Adobe After Effects. This is industry standard software for motion graphics, but it's also very, very handy for visual effects. quite a number of films, especially independent films, are going to have their effects done in After Effects. What After Effects does not do is like 3D model, like if you want to have a transformer in your movie. There are plugins that kind of do similar things, but primarily After Effects works with two-dimensional assets and compositing and stuff like that. You can kind of fake three-dimensional compositing, but I can kind of show you how some of that trickery works. But I think what I'm going to do is just pick a shot or two and kind of show you what goes into this. So I'm going to take all my layers off here. Actually, let me explain the interface so you know what I'm doing. So here's our image that we're looking at. This is kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Let me need to make an adjustment real quick. This is my color information. Can you guys see where the mouse is pointing? Okay. So hue is going to be like the type of color it is. Is it a red? Is it a blue? Is it a purple? Saturation is how like bold it is. So fully saturated is going to be like a bright bold red, and desaturated, which is going to be like a lower percentage, will be kind of like a pink or a gray. And then brightness, obviously, is a darker light. So that's going to come into play here in a few places. So this is my timeline. I can kind of drag the cursor over here, and we can kind of look at different. Uh-oh. I need to turn this off. The laptop and my desktop computer. All right, I'm going to have to restart here. Sorry about that. Yeah, if you work in this stuff, be prepared for a lot of errors. You will be dealing with a lot of those, as you will be with render times, and render times are not a lot of fun. All right. Hopefully this should come up here pretty quick. Adobe just introduced a new program where you can basically pay monthly for their software. You don't have to buy it outright anymore. It used to be like, $1,500 software packages to get this stuff, and nowadays, does anyone know how much it is? Is it like 30 bucks a month, 25? Something like that?
Yeah, it depends on which one you get. If you get all of it, it's like 50.
Different software
I just
packages.
get Premiere, and it's like 15 or 20 a month.
Oh, that's not bad. Okay. And I believe you get a 1-month free trial of any of the software plugins programs. So if you want to kind of just download and experiment, you can do that too. All right, let me pull this file back up. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. It does. I apologize. I transferred as much as I could onto the laptop, but we'll see. I have a desktop computer at home that I use. I don't have that plugin. I tend to be very Mac-centric. You know what, let's just pick this shot apart, because I know this one works. Okay, so again, here's our timeline here. We can kind of like browse through different moments in the shot. As you can see, it takes the program a minute here to create an update, so we can kind of see what's going on. Let me lower the resolution, maybe we can work a little quicker. So this shot started out in life looking like this. So that's there's me. Later on in the shot, she gets knocked back by kind of like an explosion, and I have to be there to catch her. The cool thing about all this software stuff is you don't necessarily have to have a giant studio. As long as you get just the pieces you need, say within green, you're kind of okay. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to get rid of the stuff we don't want to look at. So in After Effects, you can kind of create a matte. This is my matte. So anything within that red outline is what we're going to see. So let me re-enable our matte. There we go. Chops it down to that. And then I have a large number of effects on here that I'll kind of walk you guys through. So we've got a green screen shot. Now the green screen's not perfect. It's kind of got some wrinkles. We've got a scene here. These things are not ideal. Professional films, you're going to have the funds and the resources where you have a big enough area you can set up a permanent green screen. You can get a cyc wall that's got smooth, that doesn't have these seams. But you can still work with shots like this well enough. One side note to be aware of, if you look here real quick, you can kind of see on her arm how she's got this dark line that kind of traces her outline. That's caused by our camera operator didn't turn off the auto sharpen on his camera. So that's the auto sharpen feature, and that actually is a big pain in the butt to deal with on a green screen. So whenever you're working on a green screen, definitely turn everything to manual, turn off all the sharpening. You want to get a flat and kind of undoctored image from the camera. And preferably uncompressed. I don't know if we'll see compression artifacting on this, but compression artifacting is a pain. So the first thing I did is I wanted to color correct this thing. I want to kind of create a baseline, and that's what this little plug-in here does. This is called Color Finesse. This has, the tools aren't as important. The tools all basically do the same thing. Once you kind of learn the general concepts, it's not that tricky. You can pull this thing open real quick. Hopefully it should not cause us trouble. So I've made a number of adjustments. You can kind of see here. We have our parade right here, which shows our luminance values. And we have our vector scope, which is going to show us color information. And really what I'm interested in is the first pass I do with every shot in my film. And I have, at one point, these were all, every single shot in the sequence was lined up. And I just pulled the relevant ones for tonight. But I pull them all up, I compare them, and I make sure that the skin tones are similar, that the exposure ranges are similar. If we look at this thing, you can see this down here are my shadows, and I keep them from touching this 0% line. And I make sure that on these scopes, all my shots look relatively similar, because that way then we kind of have an even playing field that we're going to start with. This will show how saturated, how bold the colors are. I can turn that up here. You can kind of see that vector scope grows. And kind of what I'm interested in is this line coming off on an angle right here typically is your skin tone. So her skin right there, if it were kind of skewed like that, you can kind of see that this has been pushed into the yellow and see how yellow her skin tone is. Undo that. So if I bump the saturation up, you can see I've made adjustments. Her skin tone is kind of an orange color. It's where it should be. It's right on that line. Cancel that. So that's the first thing I do is I make sure all my shots are kind of corrected and kind of even. I have a plugin here called Smooth Screen, which kind of takes some of those wrinkles and stuff out. You don't have to use this plugin. There are other ways of doing it, but this is kind of a shortcut if you can afford the plugin. But if not, there's ways that you can just blur out specifically green colors. You can kind of isolate them and mask them off and all that stuff. But that helps the next step, which is to actually remove the green. The default plugin in After Effects is Key Light. And basically, I can reset that for you here. Actually, let me do this. I'm going to make a duplicate copy. I'm just going to save for the time being. And I'm going to reset this one. And so the process is almost as easy as you just pick what color you want to get rid of, and it's gone. You know, if I wanted to get rid of the orange colors, I can make her disappear. So what color your background is slightly irrelevant. But green's a really great color, as is blue, primarily because we really don't have any green in our skin tones. So that once you remove the green from the background, the skin should remain messed with. There you go. So we're going to take out the green, and you can kind of see. Hey, work with me here. I'm going to change my view. Screen that. So this is telling me what it's keeping and what it's getting rid of. It's getting rid of the black, and it's going to keep the white. And you can kind of see here. Yeah, you can see it. You got these little areas where some black is crept in. If I turn off my effect, it's a little bit of green that her hair is picking up. You see there's a green fringe on her sleeve. And you're going to have to work and refine your green screen key here to get those edges looking really good. And you don't want the edges really hard. You want the edges to kind of blend nicely with the background. Which actually brings me to my next point. So I've turned the background back on. And I have this edge blur effect. And you can see it just very subtly. You can see right here, it blurs her edges just very subtly, and it helps her feel like she meshes with the background a little bit better. Again, I have a specialized plugin for that I purchased, but you can do that with the built-in After Effects tools. The next thing that you want to do, how can I best explain this? Okay, so I'm going to create a new composition for you guys real quick. Whoop. Nope, I didn't do it. Go away. We're going to talk about something called light wrap. And basically, and you can kind of take my word on this, but in a situation where you have a background that's really bright and you have a subject in front of it, light from the background is actually going to hit kind of the edges of your foreground subject. Now, when you shoot on green screen, you're not necessarily going to have that light hitting their sides from the background that you're going to composite together. So you kind of have to recreate that in the software. It's called light wrap is the process. And so what I can do to kind of demonstrate what we're looking for, so if I make something like a red background, and we have just like a gray square that I'm going to make here. Give me 1 second. I should have prepared this ahead of time, but I did not. Okay, we can see here we've got really hard edges on our box, and we want it to blend a little bit better. And so imagine this box here is a person in the background is, you know, a big sunset or something. What the light wrap does, let me turn this plugin on really quick. I tell it where my background is. Is this going to do what I want it to do? Ooh. All right, that's a terrible example. What it should be doing is adding some red fringe around the edges of this box, so it kind of looks like the box just kind of blends in, but that's a terrible example, I'm sorry. You can leave if you want. Okay, so I'm going to turn the light wrap on. Let's see if we can see a difference. You can see it just kicks a little bit of brightness. See, especially here on her arm. See how it picks up and adds a little bit more of that blue from the background? So that's, again, that's going to help place your foreground subject in front of their background, kind of make them feel one of those kind of imperfections that's going to help marry them to the shot. Now, at this point, we've done a lot of processing, and her skin tones are getting a little wonky. So let me pull this back off. So when I did this original color correction, we had the color right. And if you look up here to my hue, saturation, brightness thing, you can kind of see the values are kind of, you know, around 20. 24 I found is kind of the magic number. There we go. But you can kind of see the values that are playing out right there. After I do all this processing, it's kind of messed with that a little bit. We got 344, which is kind of like a purple color. So we want to pull her skin tones back where they're supposed to be. I have a plugin called Cosmo that basically does that. You can see it back kind of consistently where we're supposed to be. So always kind of pay attention to your skin tones. You want those to look natural because the processing will kind of mess with that a little bit. I have a color matching which will help match. Again, can you see a difference on that? Yeah, it puts a little bit more of the purple from the background. You can do this. You don't have to have a specialized plugin. You could do, say, we'll grab one of these color correction things here. So there's a lot of blue in the background, so maybe we'll take some blue out. Here's an extreme example. She goes orange. No, we'll want it this way. There we go. That's a little too much. But you can see without it, that's a terrible example. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that looks better up there. She's kind of matching some of the purple from the background. Here she's a little kind of more neutral. So you want your subject color-wise to be kind of similar, so I have a plugin for that. And then I've just got some general, making her a little darker, and then actually blurring her just a little bit. Can you guys see a difference there when I turn that blur on? It's really subtle. Again, it's like that piece of paper example. You know, you have a gradient from light to dark. It's very subtle. It's not very strong. But it's there, and it's those little kind of detail-y, fiddly things that kind of add up to kind of help create a sense that your subject and your background are in the same spot. So there's that shot. What else can I show you? Any questions at this point? Yeah?
With your green screen, every time I've messed with it, it seems like you have to light it so evenly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you run into a lot of trouble when you're compositing. But with these plugins, it looks like that takes care of a lot of that for you.
It helps. You obviously always want to get your green screen background as clean as absolutely possible, because that will save you a lot of headaches. But it's inevitable, especially once you get on HD cameras like Canon 5Ds that see everything. You know, it gets a little tricky. The problem that let me fiddle with these things for a second. The problem that this smooth screen plugin causes is it tends to mess with the edges, because it does just kind of a generic fix. You can kind of see it alters the edges a little bit, and that becomes a big problem when you're dealing with hair. Let me see if I can find a good shot. This one. This one. Sure. Off. Yep. Okay. Where is she? There she is. Let me solo her layer and turn off her effects. There we go. So let's see, let's maybe look back here at her hair. Turn this to half. There we go. Well, maybe this is a tear duct. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I'm sorry. Bear with me. There we go. Now you can really see. Let me see if I can brighten this up a little bit for y'all. You can see how it's just chewing up the image. And you got to be really careful about stuff like that, especially when you're dealing. Hair is the worst. Hair is so hard to deal with. And a lot of times what it comes down to is throwing a lot of edge blur on it, which this made no, oh, that's because I got to turn that on first. You know, that you can kind of fake it a little bit. You can see the, turn on my other stuff here. Nope, that didn't help. Let me put a gray background there for you. Where is she? There she is. Okay. Yeah, you can kind of use a real subtle edge blur to kind of take away some of those jaggedy edges. And that's really kind of the best you can hope for in a lot of situations. Just kind of blur it. Keep the shot short so no one notices. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's look at another way that we can do some effects compositing without having to resort to green screen. So let me close out of this project real quick. I'm going to open up. Oh, that's not important. Okay. Make sure that thing is off. So we got this shot. Now, originally, if you guys remember seeing the video I played a second ago, the original shot with these two girls is right here. Yes. Yeah, that's it right there. And even this is a little cheap. This is the same actress on both sides, and really all we did, surprise, surprise, is we shot the scene twice with the camera locked off so it's not moving. And I just kind of blended the middle bits together. So that's the original shot, and really all I did for this thing is I took that shot and I shrunk it down, and I did this kind of digital set extension around it. The tricky thing when doing this is you want to make sure that the perspective of your original shot and the perspective of the stock assets that you build your set extension with are shot with the same perspective. You want to make sure that, you know, one doesn't have barrel distortion and one does. Those sorts of things are really going to trip you up. And then what you can do here is, so here's the set extension that I built, and I can kind of show you the layers. Starts with a forest background, pushed it into the colors that we wanted for the film. I darkened it, made it a little bit more spooky, added some fog, and these little bits of fog, do those, oh, those don't even show up. I wonder if I do that. This is going to look wonky, but yes. Well, it's fog, trust me. Those are animated so that there's a little bit of motion in the background. I wish if we had planned ahead a little bit better, we would have shot footage of the trees and had the tree leaves kind of flickering and moving a little bit, just to give a little bit of life in the background. Let me back this thing off. Ignore those for the time being. So here, this is, I think, an abandoned church in Spain that I bought a stock photo of. Trim the edges off, trim the top off. I think this was like a courtyard kind of thing. You can see a bit of the wall that I erased. And as I'm going through, you know, I'm making sure the edges here are kind of soft. They're not hard, sharp edges. Oops. Actually, that's my mask, my original mask. Yes, so I can turn these off. Whoops. Off. Strike two. Off. Nope. I got a lot of these. More. There we go. Okay, so there's the original photo. And you can kind of see where I've gone in and kind of traced what I want to be in the shot and what I don't want there. This part was not a lot of fun.
So did you overlay that stock photo on top of the forest we just saw momentarily?
Yes. So let me turn these masks back on. Hopefully I can undo. Oh, that doesn't undo. Oh, that's not helpful. There we go. Here's my masks being turned back on. Yeah, so yeah, here's the church and here's the forest background, you know, and I can flip these off kind of independently. You know, and if I feel like this needs to be adjusted, I can kind of shift this stuff around. And the color, you know, I have control over the color of the background and all that stuff. Little fiddly details, you know, originally this was, I think you could see daylight on the other side of these windows here and here, and I wanted them, since they're entering into like a dark space, I put some extra stuff in there. These layers, yeah. So we don't want to see through the building, we want them to be going into it. So, and then a final color adjustment over all of it. And so basically, you know, once I have my set extension, it's just a matter of placing, you know, I took that original shot, I scaled it down so it's smaller. And you can kind of see, these right here are the masks I used. So with our paper, we didn't want straight, clean edges. So what I did here was I made a mask that trims away these little bumpy parts to make it look like maybe there's leaves in the foreground. You can kind of see it covers a bit of the bottom of her dress and stuff like that. So it looks like they're behind something, you know. You're not placing an asset on top of the background. You want to kind of nestle it inside and all that stuff. You know, and I went in here and shaped these corners a little bit. I got this little plant in here because that was in some of the wider shots. There's some foreground fog. Can you guys see that? It just looks like a brightness from here, but it's a fog. Added some sun rays. So it looks like light filtering in through the trees. And that's actually animated, so that flickers just real subtly to give it some movement.
Do you make the rays in the fog, or is that?
Oh, yeah. So basically all that is, how did I do it on this one? Yeah, so what's the quickest way I can illustrate this? Give me 1 second here. So within After Effects, it has a built-in plugin called Fractal Noise, which is in the noise and grain thing. Where is it? There it is. All right, so you wind up with something like this. This just generates random kind of staticky, weird-looking noise, and you can kind of animate it so it pulses and all that stuff. And basically what I did is you increase the contrast a bit, and you stretch it out. So we want to go that way. Yes, yes. And then maybe let's invert the colors, you know, how to do it. Make it darker. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So you basically just kind of stretch and pull and putz around, and then blur it a little bit. We'll add a fast blur. And that's basically it, you know, and then what I did was I turned it into a three-dimensional object, and you can kind of rotate it in 3D space, you know. I want this one, that's the one I want. You know, and then you can go in and stretch it out even further and do all that sort of stuff. I mean, and that's basically all it is. And then what you do is you take this little image that you've created and you overlay it on top of your footage in such a way that only the white areas show and the black areas are just ignored.
And that's animated already?
Yeah, so basically what you do in After Effects is, here's the evolution, which is kind of how it changes over time. And you can basically just, you know, you go to your start time. I'll start this at 0, so it's a little easy to see. So you set a keyframe, so at 0 seconds, it's at 0 degrees. And maybe out here at 5 seconds, you set it to be, you know, 180 degrees. And what After Effects will do is it'll kind of make that difference up. Like it'll animate the values changing. So I can, there you go. Easy peasy. Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of like, it's a lot of silly little, I know. It's a lot of silly little tricks like that, though. You know, you're layering all of these little fiddly details on top of each other, and that's how you wind up with a final image that's going to look really, really good. Do it in your sleep. Yeah. If you want to get more into this stuff, like I said, I'm just kind of showing you the concepts. If you want to get more in the details of like how to work with the software, come up and ask me afterwards. There's a whole bunch of websites with a whole bunch of tutorials. Actually, I pulled a couple of them up. Sorry. This Video Copilot is a wonderful site. It tends to be kind of, he's got his very particular style. It's very blockbustery. Where are those tutorials? There we go. Yeah, he's got a bunch of, you know, you can make missiles and this guy did some of the title work and effects for the Star Trek movies. Here we go. Here's how we did the Star Trek titles. So he'll go into all that stuff. And as complicated as all this stuff looks, they're actually pretty simple. Like making this guy kind of glow like he's, let's see if this plays the little video. Yeah, this is like, did you guys see Iron Man 3? Yeah. So all he's done is basically, he took what I just created here. He made a little more detailed version. I think it's even the same, this Fractal Noise plugin. You know, if we reset it and we turn the contrast up really, really high and all that stuff and turn off the blur. And, you know, you can kind of see, if you fiddle with it long enough, you can kind of create these kind of branching effects. And really, and then he just motion tracked the actor's face and caused the graphic he created to follow the motion tracking. And it looks pretty cool, and I can promise you, this stuff is actually relatively simple to do. It's not as complicated as it looks.
He's got like a boot camp too that'll start you to begin.
He does, yeah, you're right. Thank you for reminding me about that. Let me see somewhere on here.
Basic training.
Basic training, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so if you really want to start with After Effects, he's got like After Effects 101. Here's an introduction, how to do animations, how to do transparency, things like that, how to do the motion tracking, like how we got the graphic to follow the actor's face. This is a really, really great place to start. You know, and then you move up. Do the fun stuff. Red Giant, who creates a lot of the plugins that I use, they've got a lot of great tutorials. I haven't really looked at these as closely, but this is a fun short to start this guy. So there's that. Any further questions about, oh yeah, and this shot too, to create a sense of depth, I darkened kind of the fringe outline areas. You can see they're a little bit darker than the rest. And then I blurred it. You can see on the edges as I turn this blur on and off. And that kind of helps create a sense of depth as, you know, we're looking into a space and it's not just kind of flat two-dimensional. Any other questions about this setup?
How long did like this scene, how long would that take you?
If I knew what I wanted to do, probably 6 to 8 hours a shot. I'm really fiddly with things. I like the undo button. My wife is squinting at me.
3 years.
Yeah, we worked on this film over the course. I mean, script development to premiere is about 3 years, but a good portion of that time was spent on the effects of this film. It's 12 minutes long, and I don't know why we didn't think this through, but y'all saw the little light that kind of flies. Who's seen Avarice? Okay, cool. Fair amount of you. There's a little light character that's in every single shot of the film, and we didn't really think that that would be a lot of work for some reason, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, so we kind of shot.
Is that Flash or what?
No, I wonder if I can pull one of those guys up. It is, oh good. It is a collection of things. Let's see if I can find it. And again, it goes back to that whole idea of taking multiple simple assets and layering them on top of each other. Let me see if I can find a shot. I think I've gone too far. Where is there a close-up of that thing?
Beginning of the film.
I only pulled in certain shots. Actually, I know where I can go. Bear with me for just one more second here. Let's see if I can find a good shot. Yes. Okay. Okay. Let's see if it'll cooperate with me. Turn this down a little bit. So the light, it's a completely computer-generated character, and since it's a character, we want it to be able to emote. We want it to be able to express itself. So we went back and forth for a long time trying to figure out how do you get a disembodied light to express emotion. And what we finally kind of found works really well is the light is built up of 3 little smaller orbs, and they kind of orbit each other like this. And when it gets happy, they spin faster and they get further apart and they get brighter. And when it gets sad, it kind of balls up and it droops a little bit. And so let me see. What I basically did was I created, you can see this is the light's motion path that it follows kind of over the course of the shot. It starts over here, it perks up. And you can see it gets, whoa, I'm sad. And it kind of perks up again and flies away. So what it's made up of are 3 lights. You can see these emitters here. And what each one of them are doing is creating a flare. That's the 3 together. Let me see if I can, see if this will open up for me. Okay, cool. So this is what each one of those little orbs basically is. It's kind of got a hard core, it's kind of got this lensy, flary thing, and then it's got this kind of rainbowy component that kind of drifts along, kind of as if it's passing through a camera and creating a lens flare a little bit.
And that's video compiled.
It is. Yeah, this is a...
It's optical flare.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing of optical flare.
Oh, yeah, it's a really cool plugin. This is... oops, I don't want that. Go away. Shoot. This guy, this Video Copilot guy, also creates a bunch of really, really cool, slick plugins for After Effects that does a number of things. There's jets. He likes jets and explosions. He created this lens flare application. How are we doing on time, by the way? We're good? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I get excited about this stuff, and I go tunnel vision. So he made this thing, and it does all sorts of cool stuff. So I bought some presets. So if you saw Star Trek, you know how like every shot's got this kind of big like, whoa, in the corner and all that stuff. So, you know, you can do all these kind of goofy, I think they're really pretty. They're kind of a little played out at this point. But this is good. We did recently a, let's see if this pulls up really quick. We did a Kickstarter video. Oh, goody, it's right there. I'll show you how I used it on this other video. That is totally a rabbit trail. How's our internet working? Okay. Monster. Just hanging out there in the corner. Here we go. Oh, that's not what I want to do. There we go. Okay. So watch her flashlight. See how it's kind of got these little, those kind of cool cinematic looking lines coming off of it. In there you can kind of see there's these little highlights that kind of follow her light. I used that plugin, and basically what you do is you point the software to the tip of her flashlight and say, hey, follow this around. And so it'll track the motion, and then you use that data to attach these kind of streaky light things, and it kind of flows around and moves and looks really cool. This is the dark, scary part. I'll spare you guys the jump scare.
We'll pay for it.
Yeah, there you go. Very spooky. Coming soon from Timid Monster. So yeah, so this will do a number of things. I think I used one of these kind of, anamorphic lens. And that goes back again to the imperfections, you know. When you're shooting the super widescreen, you know, they typically use anamorphic lenses, which kind of have this weird dome shape. And that's where you get these kind of like weird lines and boxes and squares and things. Is from that, the light glinting off of that domed lens. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Cool. So the light has a couple little lens flares. They kind of bunch up together. It's got, it has a central lens flare, which kind of just gives it a little bit of shape. And then it has these little itty bitty, they just like squares on the screen when you're zoomed in. They're little bitty points of light. They're little particles that kind of twinkle. And when it moves really quickly, the little twinkling things kind of spread out a little bit and form kind of a bit of a tail that kind of chase it as it goes around. So let me see if I can actually do this. Let me turn everything off but, we'll turn those off, we'll turn off the background. That should just be the light. I'll do a quick preview. Let me do some settings really quick. And so now I've done what's called a RAM preview, and it's basically going to generate, I've fed it the instructions, I've told it what effects to use, I've showed it where its motion path is, and this is now generating a preview at least of the final video. So you can see it gets sad, so it droops and it falls up. This is really processor intensive, and then he zips off. It should come back around here in a second. You know what I should do is actually that real quick. Here we go. Okay. But you can see he's got the three central parts that kind of spin around each other. And when he gets really big and excited, you can see the little bitty particulate in the center, like little fireworky confetti. And so basically for every single shot, you know, I had to track the motion of the camera movement. I had to place the effect in there. I had to tell it where to go. I created these, this gets a little bit more technical, but I created controls for it. So I have its base color. If it's inside or outside, I might shift that. I have its mood. So if I want to make it really happy, oh, that's way too happy. You know, if I increase the mood, I may crash the computer actually. He's also got a random movement. That's another thing with movement. I see a lot of mistakes with animation that people do where the movement is too smooth and too almost robotic. And so you want a bit of randomness in there. And in its little algorithms, I programmed in a random kind of drifty wiggle. So he's never just stationary. There's always a little bit of a bob and a weave. And even when he moves across the screen, he's still got a little bit of a woo. But you can see he's very happy right now. He's practically exploding. So I have all that programmed in, and that, oh, wow, -19 is also very happy. That's good to know. It's like too happy. Yeah, he's just going to loop right back in. But I created these controls so that I can basically just copy and paste the assets into the shot, and then I have these little sliders. It's kind of like mixing a rock band. He's happy, and he's kind of orange, now he's kind of sad, and he's blue, you know. And I can animate all these little characteristics kind of on the fly with a shot, and it kind of made my life a lot easier. But yeah, we went through a lot of iterations on that. I feel like I took 20 minutes to answer a short question. Any other questions? What else should I show you? Anything you guys want to see?
Dan, if there's like when shooting, if there's a out of focus shot or something like that, okay? Out of focus.
Okay.
How? I mean, is it possible to make it a little bit more focused, or can you
like if your raw footage is a little blurry? Realistically, no. Once it's out of focus, it's out of focus. If it's a little bit soft, like if it was just like a millimeter off the mark, you can add a sharpening filter to it. But the thing that tends to do, let me see if I can mock that up for you real quick. Very good. Where's a girl? Where's the girl? Let's see if I can find a shot real quick. There we go. We'll pull this one in. So let's imagine this is Haley Parker. So let's blur, fast blur. So this is what the shot looks like out of the box, maybe. Something kind of like that. It's just a little bit off, but it's just enough to be annoying, right? So what I can do is come in after the fact and add, say, I like the unsharp mask. Let me crank this up. You can kind of get some sharpness back. But what it does, it has this weird, let me exaggerate it so you can see a little better. Well, that's too much. You can kind of see, the sharpening basically looks for edges and exaggerates those edges. And so when it's blurry, the edges kind of get pushed out and they become kind of puffy. And so when the sharpening comes back in to sharpen those edges, like the edges are out and puffy and then they get sharpened. And it kind of has this weird, let me go back to the original, take a snapshot, and actually back this back off to what we had originally. You know, from a distance, that probably looks fine. Let me brighten that so you can see it. You know, at first glance, that's passable. To talk, but you can see you're kind of faking it, you know. And that's a little exaggerated just for demonstration purposes, but yeah.
When you're shooting your actors, you know, that are going to interact with these effects later on, what is there much of a difference between when you're using the green screen and you're using a real location? What do you have to keep in mind doing later on down the line, 6 months, a year from now, you're going to have to?
Actually, do you want to answer that? You might have more to say than I would. Again, this is Rachel Taylor who wrote and directed it, and I think I said that already.
So you want to know, like, I mean, you have to keep in mind, like, you mean like as far as like what you have to deal with later on?
Yeah, like is there any like trouble that you ran into where you're like, oh, you had to either reshoot it or wish you could have reshot something because it effects didn't line up quite as well?
You know, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes actually. Like I didn't take into account that like with the light, like I kind of told her like a general area to look, like I didn't tell her specifically where to look, and so later on, we had to keep the light where she was looking. So yeah. I mean, I tied myself in. Most of the time it's pretty close, but you know, there are a few times where I was like, oh, you know. So I mean, yeah, there's definitely like, I mean, with any kind of effect shot when you're shooting, you really want to think about, you know, like later on, you have to be very specific about, you know, like where the actor's looking, or you know, just I mean, all the components. You have to be thinking about everything, like the entire world that doesn't exist. You have to think about it actually being there, and everybody on set needs to be really informed about it too. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely things that I wish I'd done differently, but I don't know. Does that answer?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was maybe, I don't know, because sometimes, when you get into the middle of it, you'll find something that never would have crossed your mind, weird little.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is my first film, so pretty much none of this stuff crossed my mind. So I mean, I was really fortunate that I learned enough along the way that I mean, it really, I guess, like, yeah. I don't know if that helps.
The more you have for the actor, the better it's going to be. And like, I mean, the big point that she made was like, the first time we did a lot of these effect shots, we kind of told her generally where to look. Like, oh, it's going to be, it's going to be kind of over there, so just kind of do your eyes like you're looking like that. And then I had a heck of a time trying to figure out where to place that little light so it was right on her eye line. And the thing that I didn't really consider is like, you can kind of tell in some weird subtle way like where depth-wise people are focusing with their eyes, and that was really hard to gauge. You could tell when it was off, but it was really hard to figure out when it was on. It just took a lot of trial and error. And really, this goes back to how long do these shots take. Like, when you're trying to figure this stuff out, it's trial and error, and it takes a long time.
I made 3D programs. You use 3D programs? I saw some 3D stuff in there.
I personally don't do much 3D. It's kind of another thing that I have to learn, I used, let me pull open some.
Like the trees, like going through the trees coming up and stuff, that was really three-dimensional. So I don't know if you were.
What's After Effects? Where's Finder? Hey, there we go. I have some stills that I can kind of show you.
Do you layer the stills and then do it that way?
Yeah, they're, so she's asking, this section, breakdown stills. We find the shot first real quick. It's this one?
Is it the Evolve plugin or something like that?
This one, right?
I think that's it.
Yeah, this shot. So she's asking, these are kind of three-dimensional, or at least in three-dimensional space. And she's asking if I use like a 3D modeling program to do that, kind of like how you do a transformer. I did that in After Effects as well. And these are all actually photographs that we took of all the actual props. And I went through every single photograph and I trimmed, the object out of the background so it was transparent. And these are all actually two-dimensional inside the computer, but I have them angled towards the camera in such a way that you can't tell. So, and same thing with these walls. These walls are actually just they're like cards. And I have all the cards just stacked end on end and receding into distance in a way that you don't necessarily notice that they're actually flat. I mean, the ground took some work too. You can kind of see I got some seams here, but I figured that might be dips and peaks and stuff like that. But yeah, everything in here is basically two-dimensional that I've kind of tricked the camera with. You can kind of see how the shot comes together. These little dark edges are only there because without them, you can kind of see, like right here especially, where the two-dimensional objects intersect. There's kind of these hard edges. Yeah, you can see right here, there's a hard edge where one two-dimensional object intersects another two-dimensional object and they just clip each other. So I made it dark so you couldn't tell. Yeah. Yeah. There's a little bit of sleight of hand in some of this stuff. I mean, in this, this is a little independent short film, so it's not going to be, the greatest Michael Bay effects on the planet, but you learn to use what you got. Now here, you can really see here where these objects are intersecting and see they're kind of peeking up through here. And on this side too.
What's your best way of because the render time is crazy, have you found any good tricks to
Render overnight.
Well, other than that, while
Yeah.
you're doing stuff, just playing it while you're trying to get the timing of everything right.
It's a pain in the butt. So she's asking, so if I want to preview what this, hey, what's going on? If I want to preview what this clip looks like, I can't just hit a play button because it's got to go frame by frame and load it all into the computer and all that stuff. So I have to create what's called a RAM preview. So you hit this button and it kind of goes through. You can see this little green stuff here. That's it, basically loading the shot into memory, and I gotta wait. So we're just waiting and we're waiting. And this gets to be a real pain in the butt when you have really complicated compositions like the one I just showed you where she's looking down the hallway. Because this process, just to even see what you've created, could take half an hour.
Even while you're creating it, it's like,
Yeah.
it just hangs up and
Oh, yeah.
it's not real time. It's,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's kind of jerky.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I do, are you familiar with like rendering out proxies and stuff like
yeah,
that?
that's what I was going to ask if you use any proxies like that.
Okay, so let me see if I can demonstrate this for everybody. Uh-oh.
It ends up being more of a pain in the ass for me, but I don't know. It just kind of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, here we go. Hey! Yeah, see, it's doing this jump. This is basically 8 to 12 hours a day if you're doing this stuff. You're just looking at the computer going like, oh, come on, this doesn't help. Stop. And that was just a clip. That was just some footage. So how to mitigate some of that stuff? I will wait patiently for it to pull up a frame. Make sure that's off. So even to get a frame, it's going to take a minute. Wait for it. There we go. And it's just a shot of the girl. So to kind of help with that stuff, I'll turn off like non-essential things. You turn off, maybe I don't need these little, you can kind of see there's this little highlight.
Got those lined up, you can turn them off.
Yeah, once you kind of get certain assets lined up, you can turn them off, and that'll help save some processing time. Like the color grading, a lot of times I'll turn off because once it's set, I don't need to look at that to time out animations. And say, for example, I can do a RAM preview with just these guys. Yeah, it's kind of going.
While it's loading, how much of After Effects did you know before you started this project?
I knew it fairly well. Like I worked, I do motion graphics professionally. I do some of the animations they use at like the Tony Awards. So when Neil Patrick Harris is dancing in front of the screen, I did the backgrounds. So I know this program pretty well.
Yeah, one thing, I have a dinosaur computer working with After Effects, so I know exactly what he's talking about. A lot of things, when you have a lot of layers and effects going on, what I've done is select all of them once you have them in a certain area that you want and pre-compose them into one file. And it helps out the,
Yeah.
Well, even the pre-composing can still.
Yeah, but once you've got it pre-composed, you could render out a proxy, And I've had to do that a number of times just because it just gets so bogged down.
Yeah, she's got so many layers.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is going to take all night. You can see, again, this is the problem. It's literally like 3 little clips of this blinky light, and it's, okay. So once I have, these are like little glimmering things that are on this object that the girl in the foreground is holding. Once I'm kind of happy with this animation, what I can do is actually export this clip, this little black and white clip, and I can turn off all the animations for those lights and turn off all the extra layers and just put that rendered out clip on top, and that will actually help speed up the process of working with these other animations. And that's one of the ways that you can kind of mitigate some of these long render times, and that's called a proxy. You're basically rendering out something that's going to stand in for the final. Does that make sense?
But when you render the final product,
Yeah.
would you use that shot?
It depends. Typically no, because when you render a proxy out, like if I was going to render this out with the aim of it speeding up continual work on this shot, I'm going to render out a low resolution, because I don't want it to really burden my computer very much. A real high uncompressed file is going to bog down my hard drive. So no, once I go to do my final render, I'm going to get rid of the proxies and I'm going to put the original back in.
Isn't that an option when you make a proxy to replace the end?
It is. If you're working with, when you have multiple layers, I don't think so. Yeah, but if you have, say, if you shot on like a red cinema camera, right, and you've got this 4K footage and it's huge and it's ridiculous and your computer is just dying, you can, in After Effects, substitute a low resolution copy while you're working, and then when you go to create the final export, it'll revert back to the full resolution image and do a big, nice, pretty render. So, and as boring as it sounds, a lot of work in effects is kind of managing your time, managing the assets, making sure things are named and filed away properly, because it's just a headache if it's not. It will slow you down. You have to be like fastidious. Yeah, I've got like a color coding system for my layers. I have a naming system for the layers so that I can find things quickly and work quickly in the software. And that's asset management's huge. Yeah.
Do you do all your grading in After Effects?
I do, yeah. He's asking if I do all my grading. I do. I'm not necessarily an expert in grading, but I know enough to make it look kind of interesting. Yes?
I was going to ask something similar, but also wondering, did you guys talk a lot about the grading before, like, or did you just sort of hammer away at it and say, that looks cool? You know what I mean? Or did you say, like, I want it to look like this?
You should do that. All of these decisions should be made on the front end, because really, how you're going to grade your film, you're going to shoot it a certain way. And our DP knew that we were going to be adding a lot of effects. We were going to be doing a lot of heavy grading to kind of push it in kind of the fantasy realm. So he shot what's called a thick negative, and this is, let me just drill down here to the original. No, that's a terrible example. This is actually a really bad shot. Check this out. Let me turn these back on. I'm going to show you before and after. It's going to blow your mind. Let's take a picture. This, and then this. So that's the original shot. And then that's, now it's kind of hard to tell from here. Again, because this projector's a little dark. There we go.
I'll jump in with this answer. We actually didn't talk about it as much as we should have.
Yeah.
On this project we didn't. But yeah, that was another lesson learned.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting back to, is thankfully he shot, basically all the shots look like this. Nothing is completely black, nothing is completely white, so that there was room for us to kind of go in and make all these changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, this
Yeah.
thing, but from what you showed us tonight, it looks pretty even.
Mm-hmm.
So did you sort of apply the same thing each time, or?
Yeah, like shot to shot?
Right.
Yeah, so again, my process was, so here's the sequence where she's outside. Here is every single shot that's in this sequence. So it starts with her up in the tree.
And so that's the raw look?
No, that's processed.
Oh, okay.
That's color corrected.
Okay.
So here's the beginning shot, and this sequence covers all the way up to where they go inside the building, I think. But basically, I get every single shot out here on the timeline, and I make sure they're all consistent shot to shot. That's the first thing I do, is I take the raw footage, I color correct them so they all match. And that goes back to those graphs that I was showing you guys. Shot to shot, those graphs are really consistent. So I've got my baseline, and then once I kind of create a look, then I can kind of copy and paste the shot to shot, because they're all similar.